Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to the Spartan Tailgate podcast. Bye week is in the books for Michigan State. It seems like it's been forever since we saw a football game involving Michigan State. I'm Chris Vanini, joined as always by Spartan Tailgate head writer Dan Kilbridge. Dan, how you doing?
Doing well, Chris. How was your bye week?
It was pretty good. Got to watch a lot of games and not have to worry about writing about MSU or something like that. So I got to watch a lot of other teams play, and it was a fun weekend. It wasn't supposed to be a good weekend of college football, but as is typically the case when it's a bad weekend on paper, it turns out to be very exciting.
Yeah, that Saturday night was the best slate of bad games ever.
You couldn't flip between enough of them, and that was one thing. That's something I like college football Saturdays over NFL Sundays is that I pretty much get all the games. I don't have any special NFL packages, so I get whatever the two games are on cable during Sundays. So,
do you have Red Zone?
Nah, part of that is because I've always worked on Sundays since forever. So I guess I've never really been into NFL Sundays as much. But I pay for a bunch of second-tier sports channels anyway. Maybe I have Red Zone and don't even know it, but yeah, I like Saturdays being able to flip through all the different channels. So before we get started, wanted to give a plug for the Spartan Tailgate 24/7 VIP membership. If you guys don't have it, sign up for a free trial. You'll get a lot of stuff you don't get for free. Obviously, that's the point, but especially the latest recruiting news. You won't find any better MSU recruiting news anywhere than at SpartanTailgate.com in the VIP section under 24/7. So go check that out for those of you who haven't. So we turn to the Michigan State Spartans, whom we last saw were getting ran away from by Oregon in Autzen Stadium. Up next is the Eastern Michigan Eagles. Dan, what's the sense you've gotten from the team, from the coaches about how they attacked the bye week, what they kind of focused on, and kind of their mindset as they finally get back on the game field here?
Yeah, I think one, we kind of talked about this last week, but I do think it was a good week for them to heal up with guys like Jeremy Langford and Travis Jackson, who maybe weren't 100% against Oregon. Now, obviously, anytime you get beat, you probably want to go right out there and play the next week. But this, I kind of think, whether they liked it or not, will probably benefit them in the long run. And, I talked to a couple different guys about what they did. Some guys went home and watched their high school teams. Some guys said they watched football, and safety R.J. Williamson said he was still too hurt from the Oregon game to watch any football. So he watched Cool Runnings on Netflix, an all-time classic, and I asked him if there were any lessons he took away from that movie that could be applied to these Spartans, and he said with teamwork, anything is possible.
There you
go. So a good learning week, and now they're ready to bobsled right over the Eastern Michigan Eagles.
It's a great line there. You mentioned the injuries. It doesn't appear he's back this week, but perhaps the biggest injury news of the week was Connor Cruz, offensive lineman who's been out since late in fall camp. I believe they said he could be back next week. Dan, is that what they're saying?
Yep, he's still got a brace on, but he was actually, attacking the sled in practice this week, and I think is ready to come back next week, which I can't understate how big of a development I think this is, not only for, the offensive line, but the entire offense as they look to get this rushing attack going. It's been a little underwhelming through 2 weeks. Obviously, you got to take into consideration the competition they saw 2 weeks ago, and also the fact that it was sort of a mix and match patch job in the second half of that Jacksonville State game. But even in the first half, they didn't run the ball all over those guys. So I think in a game like this, Michigan State's number one goal should absolutely be to run and run as effectively as possible. But When you bring Cruz back next week, now you've got options because the offensive line, I think there's two guys that are totally safe in their starting spots right now, and that's Jack Allen at center and Jack Conklin at left tackle. So the two Jacks are safe. But Donovan Clark, Cody Keeler, Travis Jackson, all three, had their share of mistakes against Oregon. And now there's possibilities. What I think happens is that they bring Cruz back and put him at guard, move Donovan Clark back to tackle, and take Cody Keeler, back to the bench, and then bring him in as the sixth man. That was kind of the plan at the beginning of the year. Cruz can play both guard spots, and I think that's going to help the depth tremendously.
Yeah, I'm wondering if they kind of are able to move, because they only played 6 guys against really on the line against Oregon with Brian Allen coming off the bench. But you've got Allen that can play center and both guards. Same with Jackson. Keeler has been playing right tackle, but I think he can play both guard and tackle. And Donovan Clark played a bit of tackle before getting moved in. So you mentioned Conklin's safe. But I wouldn't be surprised if maybe for a drive or so that maybe you see Donovan Clark back over there, since he does have experience at left tackle, just in terms of getting Conklin a break. On the defensive side, Damon Knox sounds like he will be back for Big Ten play.
Yeah, that's what D'Antonio said. I sort of had to pry it out of him during the Tuesday press conference. But he offered it up. I asked him about the defensive tackles in general, and he says, we're excited to get Damon Knox back. I was like, well, when? So we don't talk about injuries. And I said, you brought it up. And then he goes, I said, man, Big Ten play maybe? And he said he thinks so. So, yeah, that's big there too, because really, they're counting on kind of Malik McDowell and Brandon Clemens as their second string right now, and I think Malik McDowell might actually stay in that 2 deep even when Kittredge and Knox come back. But that's big to get those guys back too, and I think they could have been helpful in that Oregon game as well. I think Joel Heath and LT both had plays to make and missed them. I talked to Ron Burton this week. He wasn't very happy with the way they played, and now it's going to be a little more competition there, and that's always good for everyone.
Yeah, you wrote about the linebackers this week in replacing Bulla, a VIP article. If you're a VIP member, you can go read that. Without giving your paid story away for free, what's kind of the general idea there about how things are going?
Well, basically, Max Bulla was a football savant. He knew.
He was a computer. That's what they called him.
Yeah, he knew everything about, whether it was, not just his position, not just the linebackers, but he knew where the defensive tackles needed to be lined up. He knew what the secondary was supposed to be doing, and that's why I think he was such a good player. It wasn't so much his physical skill set. He was very good there, too. But it was mostly just knowing exactly what to do and exactly where to be. And so basically what Tressel said, the linebackers coach, was that before they maybe got spoiled a little bit and just kind of left all the pre-snap stuff up to Bulla and said, hey, take care of it. But now, they're giving more responsibility to guys on the outside to where, you're looking at your strong side linebacker at the boundary side. If he sees something on that side, he can make a call. If the money linebacker, the money is the Sam now.
I still get confused on that one too, though. It's okay.
Excuse me, the star. So if the star sees something from the field side, he can make the call. And Tressel actually said, it's probably good that they're doing that now, because I think they did maybe get a little too comfortable just saying, hey, Max, go take care of everything. But still a work in progress, and also need that leadership in the group that Max Bull and Danicos and Allen provided, that fire and that ability to get after guys that maybe we haven't seen from Tawan Jones or some of those other guys yet.
Unrelated, we just got an email from MSU. Former Spartan basketball player Travis Walton has been named an assistant coach of the Idaho Stampede of the NBA DL. So
wow, okay.
He obviously was he Was he a graduate assistant in 2010? He was like a part-time. I know he came in toward the second half of that year and was involved, but
Yeah, I don't know if he had an official title,
yeah,
but I know he was looking to get back into coaching. He does a lot of youth coaching. He's got
yeah.
some AAU teams. He does personal training. He had maybe tried to get in with some Michigan State stuff last year, and I don't think they had a spot for him. But no, good for him. That's great. And our first breaking news alert on the podcast. So another good.
Although by the time you hear this, it won't be breaking anymore. But that's what we're here
That's
for.
true.
But congrats to Travis. Always seemed like he'd make a good coach.
Yeah, good for him.
So we'll see how it goes. Before we move on to Eastern, a couple things kind of wrapping up Oregon that were talked about at the press conference. One of them was this idea or not of whether or not Oregon ran up the score and whether or not MSU would need to run up the score against Eastern. D'Antonio said he wouldn't do it. You know, you put the backups in if it's a blowout and see how things go from there. It was in reference to the touchdown at the end by Oregon, but I don't think MSU thought that was running up the score. I didn't think it was because they were going to kick a field goal, and then Drummond jumps offside. So now you're in a position. Do you try to run the ball so you can get a first down and run out the clock, or how do you attack it? They just ran. I think it was a simple toss to the right. MSU, everybody crashed in, and it was an easy touchdown. It wasn't like they went back and passed the ball or anything like that or something like that. Was that kind of that's the sense I got from D'Antonio too, was that they just simply didn't make a play and he understood why Oregon was going for it?
I guess. I mean, it was sort of weird the way it came out because, D'Antonio was being asked about going for style points in relation to the playoff system, which against a team like Eastern Michigan, you should be able to run up the score organically and beat them by a convincing margin no matter what. But, yeah, he said, in answering that question, he said, we're not going to call a timeout late and to add another touchdown on the board, which raised some eyebrows because that's what Oregon did. And then, he was asked a follow-up about it, and he said, no, I didn't have a problem with that. We don't hold it against them. So maybe it was just a coincidence that he phrased it that way. And I don't know. That's another debate, too, of how much style points matter in the new college playoff. It's not like before where it was computers and margin of victory was actually a factor. But now you have, actual human beings, and you would hope that margin of victory wouldn't be that big of a deal when you look at some of these games and consider the fact that, some teams are playing their backups and others are just going for it. But, maybe that does come into play.
Yeah, it's kind of what I said in previous weeks, that if you watched the game, it was a lot closer than if you just looked at the final score and in margin of victory. So I know there were some other games going on at the time, but it was the most viewed game of that time too. So I have to imagine if the committee members are doing their jobs, that they saw what MSU did and what they didn't do in that Oregon game. So, but that's far away from really mattering at this point. But it's kind of how things go. Another one. Punt returns and kind of the coverage on their punt returns. It was asked about the gunners of opponents beating MSU down the field, and this is something that was really a problem for them 2 years ago. I know they're only 2 games into the season, but MSU has 4 punt returns through 2 games, meaning it wasn't a fair catch. They have 4. That's 2 per game. A year ago, they were at 2.6 per game, which was actually number 6 nationally, which means you have a chance to help, additional field position before your offense takes the field. Back in 2012, they were at 1.8. So it's kind of in the middle, kind of on the lower side of that so far this year in how they've been able to block guys on punt returns. Something to watch in a game that probably won't be all that close or exciting on Saturday. MSU's ability to return punts will be interesting to watch come Saturday. You have any thoughts on the punt coverage?
Yeah, I mean, 2 years ago, I think a lot of the problem too was fumbling, if I remember. I mean, they tried Andre Sims and Nick Hill, and couldn't really hold on to the ball, so they had to put Le'Veon Bell back there. But this year, yeah, I mean, and on a couple of those returns, it seems like McGarrett King was taking some big hits. That
Some of them maybe
he
should take a fair catch too.
Right.
Which would even lower the amount of returns per game.
Yep, I mean, special teams is 100% about effort and desire. You have to be a little nutty to play on special teams and just go with reckless abandon and not really care about your health so much. And I think that's something that MSU is working toward. It has looked better on the kick return, and kickoff coverage has been really good. I think Chris Fry and Monte Nicholson have kind of been all over the place. So those two guys and a similar effort from others should help.
Yeah, and in the kick return, Shelton broke off a big one against Oregon, but he also got tackled inside the 20 a few times.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another. And I think it's due to blocking because Shelton did a pretty good job last year. So that'll be interesting again to see how these things develop. So now we move on to Eastern Michigan. The Eagles are 1-2, coming off a 17-3 loss to Old Dominion.
Which we should point out formed their football team in 2009.
They did, but they're also an FBS team now, so it's not like they beat Morgan State in the opener, which is an FCS team. But Old Dominion has moved up to FBS for what that's worth. That's where Justin Verlander went to school.
Oh, interesting.
And they also lost 65-0 at Florida. So the Eagles were not very good over the last 20, 30 years. They've maybe been the worst FBS program out there. It's a tough job with so many schools in Michigan and how that goes. I got a new head coach in Chris Creighton, who comes from Drake. I talked to Creighton at Mac Media Days this summer at Ford Field, and he seems like a guy very much. He came across a lot like Mark D'Antonio in terms of a guy who's very organized and very, has his vision in that. He's a guy who comes as a proven head coach, which is something you don't always get at a school like Eastern Michigan. But it'll obviously take time to develop a program like that. He hired Herb Haygood, former MSU wide receiver, as his wide receivers coach. Raved about what he has done and the example he sets for his players. So it'll be a bit of a homecoming for Haygood. But starting off with Eastern's defense, it is once again. Well, first off, I want to say Spartan Rocky has some great preview stuff as always. VIP on the site, great numbers, great personnel previews. Everybody should check that out if you want an idea of these teams. But Eastern's a 3-4 defense again, which will mark the third three-man front defense MSU has seen in 3 games this year. And we've talked about it in the previous previews. It's hard sometimes as an offensive lineman to know where the extra guys are coming from. You have to imagine through 2 weeks of it, plus all the practice time, that they're getting better at it. I mean, if MSU can't run the ball here, then I think it's a very serious problem in terms of getting this running game going. Offensively, I mean, Dan, I mentioned the running game. What do you think MSU's trying to do? What do they need to do here?
Yeah, I mean, I think they just need to play assignment sound and make sure they know what they're doing, and then the yards will come. This isn't a good rush defense by any means. And like you said, the 3-4, it's actually 5 straight 3-4 defenses they've seen if you count the Rose Bowl and the Big Ten championship game.
Oh, did Ohio State? I thought they played 4.
They definitely do some 3-4 stuff.
Okay.
And it's just that's a look that gave MSU a lot of trouble in the past against Notre Dame when they had a lot of problems trying to run the ball against that 3-4. So now to see it this many weeks in a row, it definitely helps get in a rhythm and sort of get used to it where you're not where it's not this thing that you're totally not used to. And so that I think will help them to see it so much this year. And yeah, I mean they've got anything less than 250 rushing yards for Michigan State is a big disappointment in this one.
Yeah, EMU's allowing 5.4 yards per carry. MSU is at 4.0 offensively. So obviously you want that number to increase. I imagine you're going to get a lot of, like you said, I think they're going to run the ball a whole ton because they know they got to get it going. And if it's not working, then I think they have a problem there. Any doubts about Connor Cook's ability to bounce back after a not so great second half against Oregon?
No, I think he's shown that he can bounce back, not only from a bad maybe a bad showing, but a bad pass. I mean his ability to just forget the last play and move on is really, really impressive. And I think in order to do that, you have to have a certain type of mentality because, and I think that's kind of what Andrew Maxwell was missing the most was that mindset of, okay, it didn't go that well, but let's put it away. And I think the problem is Andrew Maxwell is too smart to play quarterback. And I know that sounds weird, but I think you've got to be
very aware of things.
Yes, you have to have the blinders on a little bit, and I'm not calling Connor Cook dumb, but I think you have to be dumb in some sense, and that you're able to forget, and even logically, when you should be worried about yourself, you aren't, and I think that's maybe his strongest point right now as a quarterback. And again, yeah, I think heavy run, and he should be able to hit on some big play action passes this week.
Yeah, that's something that coaches have talked about a lot, his ability to bounce back. I think he showed it. I think the biggest example is in the Rose Bowl after he has that pick six. They come right back down and get a touchdown for the first half against Stanford. So yeah, I don't think it's going to be anything fancy this week against Eastern. Just run the ball, got to run it, try to do different guys. What do you get? What do you get the sense of how they're looking at the tailback position? Do you expect it to be Langford and then Hill and maybe sprinkling a couple other guys unless it gets a blowout, or do you think they're trying to change things up at all?
I think they're going to give Gerald Holmes and Delton Williams a long look, and I've talked about this before. Nick Hill is, he's a hard guy to figure out because he has really good performance against Jacksonville State, but doesn't do anything against Oregon. And some of that was blocking, certainly. But the problem is he's not a change of pace guy. He sort of has Langford's same rushing style. He's just not quite as good. But when you get a guy like Delton Williams, you're sort of like Jeremy Langford light. But when you get a guy like Delton Williams or Gerald Holmes who can bruise a little bit and pick up some third and shorts, I think you want that guy as your number two tailback going into the Big Ten season. So this is sort of, in my eyes, kind of a final audition for those guys if they want to take that number two spot and run with it. And D'Antonio did mention that we could see Madre London, and I think that's only if Williams and Holmes don't do what they want them to. I think he's kind of like the emergency guy, but I still think he will redshirt because I think Williams and Holmes both have a lot of potential and could become big factors down the road.
Yeah, and you don't want to get in a position where McGarrett King's redshirt was burned in 2012 when they were just looking for something. I mean, especially if you're just looking for a backup. I've been surprised to not see as much Delton Williams this year, just solely based off of what him and Hill did a year ago. But obviously, I'm not practice. The coaches see different things. They still seem to like Hill. I'm sure being a senior is part of that in terms of any sort of leadership he's showing.
Yeah, and Williams had the injury too. He missed spring practice.
That's true. He didn't. Yeah.
Coming off surgery, so maybe that set him back a little bit.
Yeah, and looking at the other side of the ball, Eastern has run the ball almost twice as much as they've passed it. Um, they've only scored 3 points in the last 2 games, averaging 3.4 yards per play, 3.73 yards per rush. So not a whole lot there. Perhaps most notable is that it appears Rob Bolden will be the quarterback for Eastern, and he's a guy who was a local kid here, chose Penn State, played, eventually transferred to LSU, eventually got moved to wide receiver, and then transferred to Eastern Michigan. He was a class of 2010 kid. We'll talk more about him later. We got a reader question about that, but he brings a dual threat ability, certainly. He's a guy who's played in big games. He played against Alabama when he was at Penn State, so it'd be interesting to see how, if at all, the game plan would change with him in there. But defensively, you got to figure big plays as a focus this week,
Yep.
especially with what happened at Oregon and fixing up those assignments and everything.
Yeah, if the starters give up a touchdown in this game, it'll be concerning. I mean, that's how bad Eastern's offense has been. They don't have a touchdown pass yet this season. They have one receiver with more than 40 receiving yards.
40?
Yeah. Their number 2 guy has 9 receptions for 38 yards. They're averaging like 2.5 yards, or no, excuse me, 2.88 yards per pass attempt.
Yeah, and I think there's 6 interceptions in there with 1 touchdown.
Oh, do they have 1 passing touchdown?
Oh, wait, no. They have 1 interception thrown with no touchdowns. I was looking at the defense.
Okay.
Yeah, so they've had to throw they have
it's
one.
It's not good anyway. Shake it.
Yeah. They did have a punt return for a touchdown, though, in that opener against Morgan State. But I imagine a lot of running. MSU's defense should be up for that. The no-fly zone passing defense should have an opportunity to pad its stats a little bit to make up for the previous week or previous game. So, not a whole lot to really get into detailed-wise, considering how we expect this game to go. But I do recommend you check out Spartan Rocky's previews for specific personnel in there. Really good stuff that you don't need to really cover here.
But Spartan Rocky, he doesn't overlook any opponent. You got to say that about him. I mean, he will give you an in-depth breakdown of just how bad this Eastern defense is, and it's pretty impressive the depth he goes into with some of these just god awful teams.
That's when you know it's for real. He's not just getting up for the big games.
Right.
He's taking it one game at a time. Not looking ahead.
He's a true pro.
MSU's favored by 45 points here. We don't need to pick a winner. Before we get to that, though, I guess what would you say are 3, not keys to victory, but 3 things you're going to be watching? 3 things that MSU you think needs to get done, needs to show it can do well despite the opponent.
Yeah, I think, number 1 and most important is run the ball, and we talked about that, so I won't get into that much more. Number 2, I think, is come out with a fast and put up a couple scores right away, because, if they get going slow, I know Eastern's really bad, but they've got a ton of in-state kids who Michigan State didn't recruit, so those guys all feel slighted. They want to prove something.
Except Rob
and so in a game like that's right. Michigan State's looking to prove something to Rob Bolden in this one, actually. But, I guess, so to me, the fast start would be number 2. You just want to crush their will right away and let them know this isn't going to be their day. And then number 3, I remember I had a high school coach when we were playing a really bad team. He would just say, like, you have to set personal goals for yourself, like don't miss a tackle, don't miss a single assignment. And so that's what I'm looking for defensively. You don't want to see physical errors, and I think I'm just going to be looking to see how sharp they look on defense, not so much statistically, but in the way they tackle, in the way they attack things, and that's probably another thing I'll be looking at quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, it was just 2 years ago that Eastern came into Michigan State, and at one point was looking to be in a good position, but the defense never gave up. That was a point where people were wondering whether the defense and offense going to split, but they didn't, and the defense stayed firm. The offense eventually, pulled it out for an ugly, ugly win.
Yeah, I actually had this. I posed this question to a bunch of people this week. Was that the worst win of the D'Antonio era?
Ooh, worst win. I mean, I guess that Pitt game in his first year. I guess Pitt's a decent enough opponent. I want to see I don't remember what the score of that Bowling Green game was. I remember thinking it was really boring. Let me see what that score was.
I think they got him pretty
it was
good.
28-17 in the second game of the D'Antonio era, and so that wasn't. That's one that came to mind for me. I mean, you could put up last year's 14-0 win over Purdue.
Yeah, we talked about that.
Offensive touchdown.
They probably have the worst showing against Purdue of anyone in the conference. I mean, you think back to that one, and Danicos Allen is the hero twice. He had the interception return for a touchdown, or was it a fumble? I think it was a fumble recovery last year against Purdue, and then he had the blocked punt in 2011 to preserve an ugly home win.
Yeah, but they've never lost to Purdue though.
No, that's
Ohio State. Has trouble for whatever reason, but MSU wins there. They won there in 2007 and 2009 when they needed to really get wins to be. I think that was the 6th win both seasons.
That was it was the 6th win in 2007, and then but they still weren't totally in until
they had to beat Penn State. That's a whole nother. I've long maintained that Penn State win was the most important of the D'Antonio era. I know Rexroad's really big on that Purdue game because it was coming off the Michigan game, and you probably put them together because if they go 6-6, because that year in 2007, Iowa and Northwestern both went 6-6 and did not make a bowl. So if MSU goes 6-6, you have to think the bowl takes Iowa because Iowa travels well.
Yeah.
And Iowa beat MSU that year.
Coincidentally, MSU lost to both those teams in overtime that year.
They did, yep. They did, yeah, that's a good point. Man, that was a weird game, that Northwestern game. It's like every other play was a touchdown.
Who was that quarterback? C.J. Bechet or something?
Yeah, he threw for like 500-something yards. That was on BTN this summer. I watched it. C.J.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that. That was a big 2009 win too. I mean, they had no business winning that game at Ross 8 in 2009, and somehow just pulled it right out of their ass. And that was an important one too.
That was a game. Purdue attempted I think it was 50-something yarder with I forgot the kicker, Giggs or something like that, who could just kill the ball. He was hitting them from 70 in warm-ups. I remember I was watching him, and I made a comment to somebody. I said he's hitting these really long field goals, but he's hitting them low. And he hit a field goal earlier in the game, and it was close to getting blocked, and then MSU ended up blocking a kick in that game. So
Colin Neely, right?
I don't remember who blocked it. He was the one. No, he was the one who made the sack to end the game.
That's right.
And he just like fell down afterward. But yeah, Keyshawn Martin had that big kick return that led to I think a touchdown that kind of won it.
Yep. Ryan Kerrigan was just unbelievable that day too. I remember.
Yeah. So a lot of memories of Purdue.
It's far too much Purdue talk. So.
But actually, we can talk a little bit more Purdue in the reader questions. So 3 keys that I'm looking for. you got to see holes open up on offensive line. They don't have to be big gains. You don't have to rush for 7 yards a carry. But if there's holes to be hit, especially in the third quarter, in the first quarter, because this team has always kind of struggled coming out of the locker room, and it was a case against Oregon too. So make holes there. The punt returns, like I mentioned, they got to be able to see if they can get the opportunity to return some punts. And then I thought you had a good one there on defense about how they tackle if they don't miss any assignments, kind of an eye test type of one. So MSU's favored by 45 points in this one. The over-under last I saw was, I think, 54.5, which you don't often see with a point spread like that. Do you think they cover? I'm one who's, I don't bet on sports, but I'd always be weary to bet on a game that's supposed to be a blowout because you got backups in, you got guys who aren't maybe playing, putting it all out there. What do you think? Does MSU over under is down to 52, but the line is still MSU 45 points. Do you think they cover?
I'm going to say no, and here's the only reason why. I'm looking at weather.com right now, and there's a 60% chance of thunderstorms.
Oh.
So for that reason, if it gets sloppy, then no, I don't think they cover. If conditions are good, then yeah, I do think they cover. So basically, I guess check the weather forecast before you call your bookie Saturday morning. But I do, I think if conditions are good, they cover. If it's wet, it's going to be really tough.
Yeah, I'm gonna say they do cover just because I think Eastern is just really bad. I mean, both O'Connor and Terry didn't look all that great in the Jacksonville State game. You have to imagine they get in there. Dave Warner said that they're looking for ways to get Terry involved in different ways. But I'll say they do. I'm thinking like the Indiana game in like 2011 where it was like 55-3 or something like that.
Yeah, Joel Foreman at running back.
Yeah, so I'm going to say they do just because if Florida could win 66-0, I do think it's hard to say because I do get the sense that D'Antonio doesn't want to run up the score again, especially against an in-state person. I'm sure I think he met with Creighton at some camps. I'm sure he has respect for him. So
yeah, but right. The thing is, like, if Michigan State does what it's supposed to do, then the score will be run up, the right way. It'll just be backups and guys making big plays.
So we'll go into Big Ten picks here, and then we'll hit some reader questions back about MSU. Some interesting Big Ten games. Last week was really bad for the Big Ten. Week before was really bad. Conference is not looking very good. Now there's not a lot. This week doesn't have the marquee games that 2 weeks ago did, but there's a lot of sneaky, like very good matchups that if the Big Ten can win, will look good in some stats. Like they're 1-10 against the Power 5, but they've got some games here where they can add to that without playing in Oregon. Iowa is a 7-point underdog at Pitt. They played a few years ago. I think Iowa had the biggest comeback in Iowa history. The Hawkeyes, I mean, to put it frank, they look like Iowa. I feel like every year Iowa's in this situation where they lose to or almost lose to a MAC team. The offense isn't going anywhere, which is interesting because I like the pieces that they have there. I like Rudock as a quarterback. They got some good running backs. I mean, but Pitt's looked pretty good this year, although they were trailing FIU at halftime last week. But Pitt's a pretty good team. They're kind of a dark horse to win a division in the ACC. What do you think, Iowa, 7-point underdog at Pitt?
Well, this has got to be Iowa's best effort of the year, coming off that loss to Iowa State. where Kirk Ferentz blew it at the end with the timeout to ice the kicker that never works.
Well, I'll
And
say that. I'll say this. The only issue I would have had with the icing is letting him get a kick off. I think you have to do it before they get a kick. Personally, I wouldn't, because I think at this point a lot of kickers are almost expecting it.
Exactly. Yeah, that's my point. It's like now I think it's better to not call the timeout, and in the back of their head they got the counter going like, am I going to have to kick this or not? So I think it's a good move now not to call the timeout.
But Iowa was up in that game, and they gave up a fourth down touchdown pass that was inches away from being incomplete, and
and they've lost to Iowa State before, but not to an Iowa State team this bad.
Yeah, and a lot of Iowa fans are very upset, and it just feels like something that they've gone through a lot. But yeah, sorry, your pick on Iowa.
Yeah, I guess, I like Pittsburgh. And I also like Kirk Ferentz's contract, which I looked up after that game. He's signed through 2020, and he has the most insane buyout I've ever seen. They basically, if they ever decide to fire him,
like $14 million right now, I think.
$18 million. Basically, it's like they have to pay him $250,000 a month for like every remaining month left on his contract. And it's if they don't turn it around in a hurry, things could get real interesting in Iowa City.
Well, I mean, I think they are, but I don't know. He got that contract. I think it was coming off of the 2009 season, so I know that was a tough loss for MSU fans in 2009. But since that game, since that year, I think MSU fans are happy with where each program has since gone. Moving on to Northwestern, 0-2, first time since 2003. They welcome Western Illinois, FCS opponent. There is no line because it's an FCS opponent, but Western Illinois is 2-1 on the year. Pat Fitzgerald was asked fans being upset and frustrated with the start, and he said, no shit. So he's not happy. He's showing his emotion. Do you think the Wildcats respond and get their first win of the year?
Yeah, I mean, you'd hope. You look at Western Illinois, and they certainly, if Northwestern can't beat these guys convincingly, then you're looking at real problems. Although they did hang around with Wisconsin for a half before, eventually getting blown out. So I like Northwestern in this one, and I also like, aside from Pat Fitzgerald's comments, I signed up for all the Big Ten email alerts this year, and it's great. Like, you get Kirk Ferentz's post-game press conference in your inbox like 20 minutes after that Iowa State game.
I got the Kirk Ferentz one. I think they accidentally sent that to everybody, Val.
Oh, that was fun to read through. And then here's what we got this from Northwestern 2 hours ago. Northwestern football injury report, week 4. Wide receiver Tony Jones out. Defensive end Xavier Washington out. Please contact the athletic communications department with any questions. How refreshing is that? How great is that?
I talked to Pat Fitzgerald sort of about that at Big Ten Media Day, and he was saying the media are pretty much open to anything there, from what I've understood. And he said, it's impossible to hide anything anymore, so he doesn't even bother, and it makes the relationship with the media better. So yeah, he was very open about that. He said when he was a younger coach, he didn't like that, but as he's kind of gone on, he's kind of realized there's no point to hiding that stuff like that. And you compare that to a situation with Brady Hoke at Michigan, who won't talk about anything, and it's a whole big deal. So yeah,
I mean, I guess I understand it with a player like Funchess, because you do really have to game plan for him differently, and I understand it with
against Miami of Ohio. Do you think that made a difference whether or not they said he was going to play or not? Which he didn't.
No, I mean, but I do think they prepared differently with at least the threat of him being there, whereas he's out, you don't have to worry about him. So I get that, and I get, like, if there's a 2-quarterback system, like where Kirk Cousins, I remember when he was out for that Illinois game in 2009, and Keith Nickel, that was the only game he started, and he ended up winning. I can understand D'Antonio not wanting to tip his hand there because Keith Nickel's a totally different type of quarterback.
Yeah.
But with the guys like, defensive tackles and offensive linemen, it's just like, yeah, really.
I mean, you want to make a solid policy across the board, so I get that.
Yeah.
Purdue hosting 3-0 Southern Illinois. There's no line. Purdue, I don't know what to make of Purdue. They beat Western Michigan. Western Michigan wasn't a good team, but a win's a win. They get blown out by Central, and then they play Notre Dame really tough last week.
Yep.
They as they did last year. They were almost leading at halftime before a late touchdown, but still offensively they haven't shown much of anything. Do you think Purdue can get a win here against Southern Illinois?
Yeah, I mean, obviously that was their best effort probably we'll see all year against Notre Dame. But they were a lot of fun to watch when they were hanging around.
They were.
And that catch in the back of the end zone, that was unbelievable. And I was really hoping that they could do something and keep it interesting, and which eventually it wasn't. But yeah, Purdue, they really got to win this game, and I think they win big.
I'll take Purdue, but I think it'll be close. Wisconsin Bowling Green. Now Wisconsin's favored by 27. Bowling Green's a weird team. They go out and lose 59-31 in their opener to Western Kentucky. They blow out VMI, and then with their backup quarterback, they beat Indiana 45-42 with a touchdown with just a couple seconds left. Dino Babers is a coach who came from Eastern Illinois. He coached under Art Briles. He's got that style of offense. That's a lot of points. You compare that to a Wisconsin team that's still figuring out its quarterback situation. I don't suspect Bowling Green's defenses looked very good this year. 27 points is a lot, but I don't know what to make of Bowling Green. I'm gonna say Wisconsin wins, but I'll say Bowling Green covers. I don't know, maybe I'm looking too much into a win over Indiana, but I'll say Bowling Green covers the 27 points at Wisconsin.
Okay. I like, I mean, I guess, Wisconsin's defense is kind of the key here, and they looked really, really good for a lot of that LSU game and then really, really bad toward the end. I know they had some injuries, but I do think people are sleeping on Wisconsin a little too much. I think they're possibly the second best team in the Big Ten. I think they actually might be better than Ohio State, and I don't think much of Penn State. So really, I mean, I'm looking at them right now as, other than Michigan State, kind of the top team in the conference and division. Yeah. With in the conference, just other than Michigan State.
Okay.
And I think that. It's just been weird the past couple weeks. They had the Stavi thing where he has the yips and can't play quarterback, and they got the injuries at running back. But I still really like them, and I think they do cover this one.
Now, I mentioned some interesting Big Ten games. Maryland traveling to Syracuse. Now, Maryland played West Virginia close last week, lost on a field goal as time expired. West Virginia's a team that's looking pretty good, maybe. Syracuse most recently played at Central Michigan and won. The line is Syracuse -1, so it's pretty much a pick 'em. I mean, you don't need to get too detailed. Do you think Maryland or Syracuse comes out?
I like Syracuse just because they're at home. If this were a Maryland, I'd pick Maryland. I think Maryland's a pretty good ball club, but that's Syracuse is a tough place to play when you're not used to the dome environment and everything, and I think that kind of puts them over the top.
Yeah, this is one of those games where it'd be a win over a Power 5, and it'd be just kind of impressive for the Big Ten to get back into that. But I think Syracuse also. Rutgers playing at Navy. Rutgers, last week's game at Penn State, that was another one of those games I was flipping back and forth between. That was like an incredible atmosphere at Rutgers. Credit to them for really creating a great environment there. I don't know if BTN turned up the mics or anything, but it was loud throughout the whole game, and it was an ugly game. Penn State won late 13-10. Those two teams apparently really, really, really hate each other, and I think they've got a good rivalry there. It was the highest-rated game in Philly and New York. So there you go with your television numbers. That's what they wanted, and that's what they got. But Rutgers plays at Navy. Navy's favored by 7, though. But I'm going to say Rutgers comes out with this one. I think Rutgers' defense is good. The offense, Gary Nova is kind of a mess. But I'll say Rutgers beats Navy straight up. What do you think?
Yeah, I like Navy. I just think. God, I mean, that was so disappointing from Gary Nova the other night. Just totally blew that game where his defense had
5 interceptions.
Defense just laid it all on the line for him. Couldn't have given him more. And he goes out and just sort of lays an egg big time toward the end of the game. And he's really he's struggled with interceptions throughout his career in a big way, and I think that comes back to play in this one. And I think, Penn State, sort of a vanilla offense, I guess, compared to some of the other ones you see, and that's what Rutgers is designed to stop. But Navy, I think they're going to give Rutgers some trouble with that option, and just a totally, totally different look than the one they saw a week ago. So I like Navy in this one.
Okay. Penn State hosts UMass. Penn State's favored by 27. I don't think that game's interesting enough to really even pick. But Penn State's one of the 2 undefeated Big Ten teams, 3-0. They haven't looked all that great, but they keep winning, and you figure the team will get better as the season goes on. That's where MSU finishes the season, and since they are now eligible to become bowl eligible, I'm sure they're playing with a little extra fire. I imagine Penn State goes to 4-0 this week. Minnesota, it's kind of a similar deal. They host San Jose State. Pretty discouraging performance out at TCU by Minnesota in one of those Power 5 games. Minnesota's favored by 10. I think Minnesota gets it done there at home. Same, again, kind of run through a couple of these. Illinois, Texas State. Illinois is favored by 14. They're a team that's looked really bad at times, really good at times. I think it'll be enough to beat Texas State. Not really interesting. Indiana plays at Missouri. Missouri is favored by 14. I really keep thinking Indiana's going to turn the corner here, but that loss at Bowling Green last week was bad. I don't think they'll get it done at Missouri this week. I imagine you have similar thoughts, but that gives us 2 more marquee games. A Big Ten Pac-12 matchup. Utah travels to Michigan. That's an interesting matchup because Utah is averaging 50-something points a game, but they're 2-0 against 2 bad teams, one of them being Fresno State. Michigan is coming off a ugly but still comfortable win over Miami of Ohio. Michigan's favored only by 4 points. Utah's offense in recent years has been really bad, but they brought in Dave Christensen, the former Wyoming head coach, to be the offensive coordinator. Through 2 games, they seem to be lighting it up against some bad teams. I think Michigan will present a bigger challenge. But this is one of those games where, after that Notre Dame loss, this started to look very, very winnable for Utah. My pick is Michigan by 3, which would mean Utah covers, but I think it's going to be a high-scoring game. I have it in the 30s. 3:30 on ABC. Really interesting matchup. Utah went in there and won in 2008, so the coach knows what he's doing, although the players are different. I mean, Utah, Michigan, what do you think? Do you think Utah's got a good chance here?
Yeah, I think they've definitely got a chance with that offense presenting a whole lot of problems. But Michigan's defense really not as bad maybe as it looked against Notre Dame. That 31-0 score, the numbers were actually pretty good for the defense most of the game.
Yeah, it's not often you see a team outgain the other team and lose 31-0.
Right, yeah, and so, they're not as bad as people think, but the offense, I think, is much worse than they looked against Miami of Ohio.
Turnovers again. I think they're -7 already on the year.
Yeah.
Turnovers. They had a pick that was barely deflected, and those turned into 10. I mean, it was 10-10 late in the second quarter there.
Yep. If Funchess isn't ready to go, well, I don't think this Michigan offense, they might have a problem keeping up with Utah. I'm not going to pick Michigan to lose to Utah. I think they'll lose a couple more Big Ten games down the road, but I do think they'll pull out a wild one here. I think this should be a lot of fun, and I'm excited to watch it while working away from the press box at Spartan Stadium. I like Michigan, but I think this is going to be the most entertaining game of the week.
Yeah, and lastly, in the nightcap, this would have been fun 10 years ago, 20 years ago. Miami, Florida travels to Nebraska. Miami's 2-1. Ugly loss to Louisville. Nebraska's 3-0, an ugly win against McNeese State, but they've blown out. They've played 3 really bad teams. They blew out 2 of them, and they barely escaped 1. Still don't really know what to make of them. I mean, Amir Abdullah looks really good. Line is Nebraska getting 8 points at home. I think Nebraska wins this. I think they win it kind of handily in a bit of a high-scoring game, but I'm going Nebraska somewhat big here, in what I think will be a great nostalgia game.
Yeah, right. Like this would be like a great 1999 national championship game.
They met,
I like Nebraska big. As I was trying to think of when that year was. Yeah, so
that was the year that Oregon. That was the year Oregon could have gone, but they picked Nebraska.
Yep.
Despite getting.
That's right. And
Colorado, I think they lost you, right? It was a Big 12 championship game.
Yeah. So. I like Nebraska big. That place is going to be crazy at night, and Miami looked really, really bad in that Louisville game, so I like the Huskers here.
Yeah, Nebraska, they were number 2 in the country, and they lost 62-36 to Colorado in their final regular season game, but still went to the national championship game and got blown out by maybe the best college football team ever. That Miami team, 37-14, with so many NFL players. What was Oregon that year? That was the year with Joey Harrington, and they had lost to Stanford in the middle of the year, 49-42. But instead, they went to the Fiesta Bowl and beat up that Colorado team. So.
All comes full circle.
Yes. So, again, a big opportunity for the Big Ten here, not to get marquee wins, but to get wins that will at least say, hey, this conference isn't crumbling in pieces as it appears to be. I mean, an Indiana-Missouri game you don't expect, but it's stuff like losing to MAC teams that really makes what the conference needs to do is win the games it's supposed to win. That's why you get teams losing to MAC teams. But if you can beat Utah, if you can beat Navy, if you can win at Syracuse, beat Miami, those are 4 solid. Those would be 4 solid wins for the conference. In Iowa at Pitt, that'd be 5. You got opportunities here to kind of stand. I'm sure it's not at all what they care about, but at least make the conference, look like it's still here and not completely washing away as.
It's a chance to save face a little bit. Like, they're not going to get any respect this week no matter what happens, and I don't necessarily think they should based on the last 2 weeks. But you're right. At least you can say, okay, see, it's not a total dumpster fire. Some of these teams can beat average to good opponents.
Yeah, and we'll wrap this up with some reader questions. Andrew Murray tweets, Coach D said the defensive backs played well against Oregon. Your explanation or thoughts on that, is the secondary fine or was it exposed? I don't think it was exposed. I think it's just Oregon.
That's such a great word. I love that word. Any time something goes, they were exposed out there.
Well, I mean, because it was built up to be, this great defense against this great offense, except for this wasn't the same defense, and I think that's where the problems were. You saw miscommunication from guys who haven't played in games too much together. I don't think they were exposed. I think the secondary will be fine. I think Oregon was just, like I said, arguably the toughest game they would ever play, and they had just too many breakdowns by the end.
Yeah, and I don't know what D'Antonio quote he's referring to. I'd have to look at it, but he's not going to throw his guys under the bus after that loss. I do think, yeah, I mean, a couple of times, look, Trey Waynes just falls down and they score a touchdown.
Yeah, you got those bob and pick plays.
Yeah, Darian Hicks gets totally picked off of Devin Allen. They score a touchdown.
I will say, I do think you're going to see more of those this year, maybe compared to the past after what Oregon and Jacksonville State did. You might see some more crossing routes than normal. Maybe some teams pick up on that, but I imagine Spartans are preparing for that.
Yeah, they've got a great secondary still, and they'll be fine.
We've kind of talked about this before. Andrew Erdman asks, is it foolish to count Michigan State out of the playoff picture already? The teams ahead of them all play each other. And no, I think last week proved exactly that. You had USC go out to Boston College and lose. UCLA barely beats Texas. It's been a pretty crazy start to the year already. So I think last week you might feel better about playoff chances than maybe coming off the Oregon loss, because they did move up 2 spots to number 11 in the polls, just by a sheer other teams losing. So,
right.
Yeah, I mean,
I guess it's foolish to say totally that, yeah, they're out of it now. I mean, to definitively say that they're out is absolutely foolish. But to say that they don't need help is equally as foolish. I mean, they need Oklahoma to lose at some point.
Mm-hmm.
That'd be great for them if Florida State could lose. And obviously they want Oregon to win out because of that game. But looking at Oklahoma's schedule, probably the biggest game coming up, they're at TCU.
I think their biggest game is this weekend at West Virginia.
That's right. That'll be a tough one. So, MSU fans should get their Mountaineer hats on and channel their inner deliverance for that one. But so yeah, I mean, they need stuff to happen. It's not like if they win out, no matter what they're in. But the things that they need to happen aren't totally outlandish. I think it's safe to say that if Michigan State wins out, they should feel good about their chances. It just depends on what else happens, and obviously you need to win out first.
And on that note, if they win out, and if they win out and win the Big Ten championship game, that will give them 19 straight Big Ten wins, which is one away from the record, which was Ohio State. Ohio State from 2005 to 2007 lost 20 straight, or won 20 straight, before losing to Purdue. I think it was Purdue. No, it was the Illinois game. So, yeah, that's obviously far down the road, but I think it's something everybody's thinking about. So, fun with hypotheticals. If they were to win out, they would be close to a Big Ten record. And if they... I don't know if it was you or someone brought up winning all the games by double digits again, like they did last year. That would, again, mark 19 straight, which I have to imagine would be a record. So another question from Tim Witkowski. Now, this is a great question. Now that the national championship game is out of the picture, should MSU just start the Terry and Arnett era now? I completely agree with this.
Yeah, just go like all freshmen right now. Get Gerald Owens in at running back. Jeremy Langford's career is over. Probably want to start Jace Giannakakos and Nick Padla up front.
Cook's already gone to the NFL as a first-round pick. You got to get Terry ready anyway.
Well, yeah, I mean, and D'Anthony Arnett, is going to be an eventual NFL Pro Bowler, so you got to get him onto the field as soon as possible. I think that's a great idea all around.
Tim notes that this was a joke question, so that's okay.
I would like to note that was also a joke response.
Last one here from Breslin Birds. This ties back into Eastern. And what does the parallel universe where Bolden commits to MSU look like? Now, I went and looked this up. Bolden committed to Penn State about a month after Joe Boister committed to Michigan State. But let's just say Bolden picks MSU. what do you think happens from there? He was the class of 2010, so Connor Cook had not yet been brought in, but I'll go first. So say Bolden comes in. We assume he redshirts 2010. He comes in 2011 as a redshirt freshman. You got Kirk Cousins as the quarterback. He does his thing. So now you're between a junior Andrew Maxwell, and a redshirt junior Maxwell and a redshirt sophomore Bolden. I still think Andrew Maxwell beats him out, and at that point, I think he transfers out because he has shown to do that several times. So that's what I think I'm saying. He ends up transferring out anyway.
Yeah. So your alternate universe is not an alternate universe at all.
It's not that alternate-y, no. But I don't. But if you look at now, I mean, Connor Cook, MSU was one of the few big offers he had. Do they still offer him? You think probably. So you still got Cook in there. Cook probably doesn't take over at all in 2012. Well, maybe he does, depending on when Bolden transfers in this alternate universe. So maybe we end up exactly where we're at. I guess that's kind of where I'm going with that.
I think your answer was good enough for both of us, Chris.
Yeah, Graham Couch had an alternate universe where Eastern completes that long touchdown pass in 2012 against MSU, goes on to win the game. MSU finishes 5-7. Doesn't get fired, but Ron English gets a contract extension. MSU doesn't go to the Rose Bowl. All that, and it's kind of contradictory to the answer I just gave, but I'm a big believer in the butterfly effect.
Yeah.
Where if a butterfly maybe flaps its wings a little differently somewhere.
Yep, good movie too.
A hurricane happens. You know what? I hear a lot of bad things about the movie. I liked it. I've watched it several times. One of the few things I thought Ashton Kutcher did a really, really good job in.
Yeah, you don't hear that often.
For a serious type of movie. So despite me believing in the butterfly effect, I still think Rob Bolden committing to MSU leads to the same results. Although maybe Joe Boister doesn't suffer injuries and that. But I guess just
let me hit you with this butterfly effect alternate universe with everyone. You kind of touched on this earlier. I decided not to bring it up, so here's my chance. Everyone talking about how McGarrett King's his red shirt was the big mistake, and they should have kept the red shirt on. My question is, what if he is not as prepared last season, not very comfortable, doesn't work his way into the playing group because he's not used to running with the starters and getting that feel of the game speed, does not make that touchdown catch at Iowa, which at the time was the Spartans' first play of 40 yards or more on the season. Michigan State goes on to lose that game. The offense never gets clicking. They lose a couple more. All of a sudden, D'Antonio's got a hot seat, and who knows where we are now. So basically, it's looked at as a terrible decision. All I'm saying is maybe it won in the Rose Bowl. That's it.
So if you have any alternate universe takes, feel free to leave them in the comments if you've lasted this long with us, and thank you if you have. That'll wrap things up here. One comment I wanted to make. I've submitted the podcast. I've figured things out sort of with the podcast and getting on iTunes. I submitted the podcast to iTunes last week. I haven't heard back. From what I understood, normally that happens really quickly, so not quite sure about that. I'm trying to get it on iTunes as soon as I can. I'll let you know when that happens. Once again, highly recommend you get a VIP membership for 24/7 Sports and Spartan Tailgate for all the latest detailed recruiting news you won't get anywhere else, and other insights and analysis you wouldn't get otherwise. Very much recommend that. You can sign up for a free trial, give it a shot, see if you like it. I think you will. 24/7 Sports has been seeing terrific growth among its users. I think that's for good reason. So I would highly recommend you do that. So Michigan State against Eastern Michigan at noon on BTN this Saturday. I'm sure I didn't need to tell you that for you to just know it was going to be noon on BTN. It was just that was what you could have just penciled that in at the beginning of the season.
That's a given.
Should be a football game. Probably not
It'll
too
last
stressful.
60 minutes long. There'll be some tackles. It'll be at Spartan Stadium.
But there should be some other good national and Big Ten games, so enjoy the weekend. We'll be back again, as always, next week. Thanks again for sticking through here with us. Dan Kilbridge, I'm Chris Vanini, and we will talk to you guys later. See you.
See ya.